Right, good afternoon, everyone. Quite a few people have joined already now, so hopefully we're ready to go. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on RISE with SAP and what it may mean for your security and compliance. My name's Chris Haig. I'm an SAP security architect in the applications and cybersecurity function at Turnkey Consulting. And I've been working in this space for some 23 years now, including about 16 years as an end user and the remainder with various consultancy firms. And I'm joined today by Andy.
Morning, Chris. Nice to see you. Morning, everybody. Andy Steer, Vice President and Chief Talking Officer for Entity Data. You ruined the joke by putting Chief Technology Officer on the slide, but normally Chief Talking Officer, and it's a real pleasure to be joining you today, Chris.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. So a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. Hopefully we'll be doing this via either the slides themselves or questions that you may pose as the audience, and we'd welcome you to put those into the chat window as they come up, and then we'll should have time at the end to take them up. But what I really want to start with today in a moment is making sure everybody's up to speed with what RISE is. But we're also going to cover some security activities that remain your responsibility, why the app layer still remains important. It's important in any SAP project, and some impacts that you might have. And to do that, I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Lovely, thanks very much, Chris. So what we thought we should do on this webinar at the beginning really is just make sure that everybody's aware of what RISE with SAP, this reasonably new offering is. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the detail or may have just heard of the general concept, we're going to do a bit of a 101 and a leveling off to make sure you're all aware of what goes into RISE with SAP. So the first thing, it was launched 2021, January, beginning of the year, to great fanfare. Conversations that I myself had with a number of organizations following that announcement, it was pretty clear that not everybody really understood what RISE was all about. So this little 5-minute or so overview that I'm going to give you here is something that I've given to many customers over the last year or so, and hopefully you'll find it valuable. So the first thing I really want to make sure and focus on is the piece in the middle of that diagram there, where it says one offer, one contract, one responsible company. Let's try and explain what we mean by that. So RISE with SAP is a single contract with SAP for the provision of a bundle of services and solutions that are designed to enable your organization to make the move to what SAP call the intelligent enterprise, powered by SAP S/4HANA, and with S/4HANA as the so-called digital core at the center of that. Now, when you're looking at this offering, it's important that you not only know what is included, but also what isn't included. And we're going to sort of work through those and explain that to you. So if we start with the first one, most importantly, what do you get? You get a cloud subscription for the S/4HANA cloud product. Now, this is the first thing that you need to get your head around, because this means a change in your current contract and software. So you're probably, I would think most of you on the call are probably running a traditional perpetual license with maintenance. You pay your maintenance every year, you buy more licenses as and when you need them, and you probably run that on-premise or in a data center somewhere, maybe on a hyperscaler, but most people probably data center or on-premise. So there's a change there that you move to subscription license and you move to a different product. So you move to S/4HANA. So that's the first thing that you need to get your head around that is going to be changing. Okay. Now, the second thing, we mentioned it briefly, the infrastructure. So where you run that software, or more to the point, where it is run for you, where it's provided as a service from. Now, in a RISE contract, you have a choice. Most people, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. But if you happen to be in China, then you can also run it on Alibaba. And it's likely that we'll see other options coming in the future there from SAP. But at the moment, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. And what that means is that in that context, the SAP Cloud Operations team are taking responsibility for provisioning, monitoring, and managing the infrastructure that the software is running on. Now, clearly that will have an impact on your basis teams, if you have basis teams within your organizations. If you have a relationship with somebody else to provide that basis capability, then it'll have an impact on that, because in this case, it's provided by the SAP team. So that's the second point. The third one, there's been a lot of talk over the last few months or so of SAP's investment into the whole topic of business process intelligence, business process optimization, business process improvement. Now, when you purchase and move to a RISE contract, you will receive access to a number of components, tools, services that support business process discovery and improvement. And that includes some of the existing capabilities SAP have. So what used to be called the Business Scenarios Recommendation Report, the BSR report, now rebranded as Business Process Discovery Reports, but also includes some new capabilities from an acquisition they made of a company called Signavio, which again is a business process mining tool that can look at your existing implementation, highlight any issues or challenges or bottlenecks around business processes, and allow you to design what the new ones look like. But then also, when you move to the new world in S4, you can use those components to monitor the effectiveness of those business processes on an ongoing basis. So that's an important area. If you're not familiar with those topics we've just been talking about, it may not be your particular responsibility in your organization, but you want to certainly make sure that others, maybe perhaps more on the functional side of things, you want to make sure they're aware of this because it's a good opportunity. So those are the first three. So the next one, a collection of other tools and services that come along with it. Now, a lot of these are things that will be familiar from the wider SAP capability, if you like. So things like the readiness check to help you look at your existing system and decide whether there are add-ons or components in there that won't be compatible with S4 in the future. You also have custom code analyzer. I have yet to meet a customer who doesn't have a huge amount of custom code within their SAP system. Many times they don't actually know how much is in there or what it all does. The custom code analyzer can help you with that. So you want to get your heads around that. You can actually, a little bit of a secret, you can actually do that without needing to do anything around RISE. You can just do that as part of your general preparation for S4. You should definitely have a look at that for code remediation, code refactoring, all of those kind of things. You also get some licenses for the Learning Hub to help your users get up to speed more quickly with the new products and what they're going to offer. And you get the replacement for Solution Manager, the Cloud Application Lifecycle Management tool. And you get some Enable Now capabilities to build your own customized training and enablement. So that's the embedded tools and services. That particular area evolves over time as well. So they're always putting new things in there and enhancing what's in there. The next one is one which is probably not as familiar to existing SAP users if they aren't already using these tools. So you may be aware that in SAP's sort of vision of this intelligent enterprise with S4 optimized organizations at the core, you really have this capability to extend the network that you're part of. So here we're talking about building closer relationships with suppliers, with logistics partners, those sorts of things. And this network starter package includes an initial set of consumption licenses to get you going in this area. So if you want to look at next generation procurement, for example, you can do that through the Ariba network. If you want to look at tighter integration with your logistics partners, you can do that using the logistics business network. And if you're one of those organizations who are moving perhaps from a traditional product model to a new business model where you are maybe selling connected products or services around your products, then the asset intelligence network can be very useful to help you build those new business models as well. So that's the network starter package. It's a bundle to get you started, okay? And then finally, we've got the business technology platform. Used to be called SAP Cloud Platform, has had a variety of different names over the years, but this is the platform where you can do your cloud development. Now, what does that mean in the context of S4? Well, really, that means if you're looking to extend and add capabilities, really, you should be doing it on the cloud platform in alignment with SAP's strategy of sort of keeping the core clean, as they call it. Now, there's a few reasons for that. The number one reason is with the software as a service cloud subscription products, generally, you don't get a lot of access to do a lot of things within the platform itself. So you need to do it abstracted out, loosely coupled on the business technology platform. So they provide you with some credits because it's a consumption type model. So you can get going and you can use those credits on things like development capabilities, user experience capabilities, integration, automation. You've got the RPA type tooling in there as well. You can even use it for analytics with SAP Analytics Cloud being available within BTP as well. So there's a whole range of sort of things that you can do there. So look, let's sort of summarize. So RISE with SAP, one offering, one contract with SAP that includes all of these sort of services and product offerings. But there are some things that it clearly doesn't contain and doesn't address. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to highlight here. The first one is application management services. So we talked about SAP taking the responsibility for the provisioning, the management, the monitoring of the infrastructure. So if you like, the technical managed services, but they don't provide the application management services. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, wow, I'm the person who's responsible for doing this in our finance area, you probably still will be, okay? That role isn't going to disappear. If you're thinking, oh, wow, well, I work really closely with this third party who do our application management, that relationship will still be valid, but you'll need to, of course, make sure that they've got the capabilities to provide that service on the new platform when you move, and that they're kind of RISE aware or RISE savvy, whatever phrase you want to use. But those things are not included, right? And I guess another area that we need to think about either not being included or having an impact on is security, right? And that's why we're here today, I guess, isn't it, Chris?
It is indeed, Andy, and thank you for that very quick but very detailed overview of what comes in RISE. I know that's something that all these extra bits was something I hadn't realised was in there before we started looking into this. So yes, as Andy mentions, we want to now look about the impact of RISE on your security and compliance aspects. And to do this, I'm going to use the SAP Secure Operations Map, which has been around in various guises now for a few years, but this one is from the third version from January 2020. And it's been adjusted to include some of the people and process considerations rather than just the technology aspects. And SAP positioned this as covering everything you need for a solution, not just SAP. So it is transferable, but obviously it's got the hook points into the SAP world. And it's also, particularly if you're new to SAP, it's a very good reference model. And you can also use it in conjunction with something like the NIST cybersecurity framework to help you consider what controls you'll need to have in place. But that would be a webinar in its own right, and we don't have time to cover that today. So given that, as Andy mentioned, RISE is looking at moving the core application to the cloud, I've sort of put this impact line into the slide to literally say that it's the application system and environment areas of the secure operations map that will be changing. That doesn't mean to say there won't be changes or some considerations for change within the organization and process areas, particularly if you've been looking at some of this business process redesign that Andy alluded to with the process explorer and things, and moving to best practice, for example. SAP are very keen in the S4 world to standardize and simplify, and adopting best practice may mean there are changes there. But that's usually covered by changes to roles and authorizations. And you'll be doing some of that if you're moving to S4 anyway. So what I'm going to do now is zoom into the technology area and look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So as we said, the application layer is in my world, it's what SAP security used to be. Way back, SAP security was just about users and their roles, and it sort of morphed over time. RISE doesn't necessarily change much of that, but it has got some touch points. But you will need some focus on it. You'll always have users that need to be authenticated on the solution and be granted their authorizations to what they need to work with via SAP's roles concept. RISE doesn't necessarily change that, but we'll be introducing S4HANA, and S4HANA, to be used properly, needs Fiori, and Fiori needs probably brand new roles. Can't get around that. You might be able to lift and shift some of your old roles, but you might not be then making the best use of the new processes that are in there. And then looking down the next level, the system layer covers the controls that ensure that the users are able to, what the users are able to access is being securely deployed. And importantly, any known vulnerabilities have been closed down. Every first Tuesday of the month, Patch Tuesday in the SAP world, we get a stack of SAP security notes to be applied that highlight some vulnerabilities in the core software that really need to be closed down to make your system secure. And the last layer of this, the environment layer, the lowest level really, this is where your SAP and non-SAP technical infrastructure sits, which is what Andy alluded to, is probably where your hyperscalers are actually providing the infrastructure as a service. And then the SAP Cloud Operations team are actually managing your SAP environment. So I've given the operating system and the database security and the security hardening thing areas with ticks, because RISE with SAP will, on the whole, take over that responsibility for you. You'll still have to make sure it's done properly, but they will be delivering the hardening of the system, making sure that patches are applied, and ensuring that the database is running correctly. That doesn't mean to say everywhere else doesn't need some attention. So one of the obvious areas that we might need to look at, and I put a question mark on it because we don't know how much effort is going to be needed, it will vary by customer, is network security. Your SAP systems, if you were running SAP already, might have been on your on-premise, on your own network. Well, they're moving to the cloud now. So you'll have to ensure you've got that secure access to the RISE platform. And you may also want to retire some aspects of your network where your SAP used to sit. You're decommissioning a network segment if you had that. But at the very least, you'll have some changes to routers and firewall rules and everything to make sure that your end users can still get through to your new SAP S4 call. Another thing where it might change, you might need some change, is on the client security side of it. Even though it's down in the environment layer and you think, well, low-level environment should be managed via the RISE thing, it will to a certain extent, but you'll be now accessing those what become external cloud-based systems from your current client machines. And to leverage S4 properly, you'll be adding Fiori to the mix. And that will need possibly a minimum spec of browser on your machines, or even if you're putting in mobile, a whole mobile infrastructure might need to be deployed that you may not already have. And another thing about that is, because you're hardening the system, anything that's still accessed by a SAP GUI, there might be some minimum versions that you now need to maintain. S4HANA usually needs a fairly recent SAP GUI to run properly. Another area where there's some changes going to come in is in the area of secure SAP code. Now, a big headache is taken away from you, because if SAP are managing the core, they'll know exactly which notes need to be applied and they can apply them for you. One of the biggest challenges looking at an SAP note is, do I really need to do that sometimes? And I challenge many organizations have the right technical resources to fully understand the impact of a note. But here, SAP will be doing it for you, but you'll still need to be aware that they're doing it and ensure that you approve that. And ensure you schedule those to suit your organization's operating windows. I think, Andy, we talked the other day about higher education, making sure that they do all their patching ready for their busy times. You know, you're never going to be an ideal time to patch a system. Once that is moved to the cloud operations team to oversee, you've got to make sure you've got that partnership in place to make sure that they do it when it's suitable for you as a customer. Because they really want to have any vulnerabilities in their systems closed down as soon as possible. One area where it may change as well is around the security monitoring forensics. If you've got anything that was sitting directly on your ECC system, for example, you might need to port that to your S4 system. And there are some considerations about that. SAP Cloud Ops will now be doing a lot of the daily system monitoring for you anyway. And you may need to adjust some of your existing tools, but there may also be some tools in the infrastructure that they can then use for that secure operations environment. So again, question mark on that one because there'll be change, but the change will be very specific to how you run SAP and how your company is structured. One thing that probably will remain your responsibility is security audit logging in the forensics area. So this is SN20, the security audit log. That literally runs within the system, and it's up to the customers to make sure it's set properly and being monitored properly. Nothing worse than having something running but then forgetting to look at it. And another area where there may be some impact, even though I said there's not much changing in the application layer that is unique to RISE, the users and identity management may change because you're now provisioning to what might be your first external system, your first cloud-based system. So there'll be some changes in the user and identity management space. All of those are without considering any changes to processes. Once you've got S4, once you've got that intelligent enterprise, that new core, you can leverage solutions like robotic process automation, RPA. You can look at the analytics capabilities that are in there. And as Andy alluded to, you might want to, if you want to extend your S4 solution, you probably should be doing that by the SAP Business Technology Platform so that you can keep the core clean. And that's important for SAP as a software provider, as a service provider, so that they can manage their future upgrades for you and patching. Nothing worse than being faced with a very bespoke system with thousands of lines of custom code, some of them no longer relevant, and you having to scan through all those every time you want to do a system upgrade. So hopefully that may have actually posed some questions, and I'm seeing a few things coming through in the chat window on there, which we'll come to. But here's a few that we've already sort of thought about, and this will vary. First one that we often get asked is, well, once I've moved to the cloud, do I still get access at the operating system level? Well, I think the quick answer for that is most likely to be no. Why would you now need it? Because you're not really managing that part of the system anymore. SAP Cloud Ops will be doing all the tasks related to running the database and application. So really the need for the customer to be at that OS level should be greatly reduced. So we'd assume access to the OS level becomes a no by default. Even with a very good case on the question, why do you need the OS level access? Still think the answer is likely to be no, you're not having it. Bear that in mind if you've got some solutions that are connected to SAP, but running at the operating system level. Big one, which we're often asked, is can I still use my third-party security tools? And with anything, I'm going to put a little caveat on, it depends what the tool is, how it is deployed, and how it connects to the SAP system. I think the starting point would have to be, do not assume you'll have exactly the same tool, might be from the same vendor, but it might be a slightly different version of it, to be installed. And depending on your S/4HANA core option, whether you've gone public or private edition, it needs to be a discussion with SAP. If it's the public edition, I think the answer is going to be a distinct no. I think, Andy, you might have seen that already in some scenarios.
Yeah, I think third-party add-ons, whether it's security related or anything, any third-party add-ons that connect to SAP, I broadly put into two camps, if you like. There's closely coupled. For some people, they say, well, that's installed, as in it runs kind of inside the ABAP stack and it's very close to the core of SAP. Or you have loosely coupled, so using proper APIs, etc. Now, if you're on the loosely coupled end as a third-party application, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to continue to use those connectivity options, provided those APIs are still whitelisted on S4. On the other hand, if you're something that demands to be installed in the core, then the chances are that you are not going to be able to do that when you move forward on the RISE platform. So the vendor should be thinking about what their alternative approach is for that. But like I say, Chris, that's true for a whole range of document management solutions, not just security solutions.
Yes, I mean, obviously I've got my security hats on, but there are changes to any tools that get connected, not just security ones. And as I say, anything loosely coupled, RFC connected or API calls, likely to be okay, but have that discussion with SAP. I think SAP probably 6 or 7 certified ways to connect to an S/4HANA cloud, and as long as you're connecting in one of those, they're probably okay.
Sorry, Chris, there's one thing that I just add there as well. I mentioned the readiness check earlier on. If you run the readiness check, that will analyze third-party add-ins and also give you a view on those for their S4 supported state. So it's a good idea to run that, because that may highlight and red flag some items as well for you.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that, Andy. That's good. Yeah. And I say, we've been having some discussions with third-party tool vendors about this already as we encounter them, because we're seeing more and more RISE projects coming through to us. And even if it's own namespace solution, so in theory, it doesn't get touched by part of the SAP upgrade. SAP will still be, you should have that discussion with them about putting that tool on in the private edition. If you're public edition, I think you could say all bets are off on that one, or it's a no, unfortunately. SAP are hoping that you will, or rather, we envisage we'll see more vendors moving to the extension suite, so that they get a RISE aware version rather than a closely coupled one. And then this one, I think I've actually seen in some of the questions in the window. Who takes care of that technical patching? Well, SAP will be now running your core system, where the SAP Cloud Operations team, and so they'll probably make you aware that some patching is needed, particularly around high priority notes, but also they should be doing that regular housekeeping of the system and trying to keep that core up to date. Having the clean core makes it easier for them to do an upgrade, and also means that you as the SAP customer get the new functionality. But it's also in SAP's best interest to keep as many RISE customers as up to date as possible to minimize their support effort. Nothing worse than trying to maintain 10 or 15 different versions of old software for 1 or 2 different customers. And because it's now in the cloud, there's going to be that push to keep them up to date. So those are some of the pre-guest questions we thought we'd have. So let's see what we've got from the audience. So bear with me one moment whilst I look at another screen on that one. Andy, this might be one for you, to do with a custom code analyzer that you alluded to.
Yeah.
Is that got checks in it for vulnerable code?
So what I would suggest is, the ABAP test cockpit, which you can utilize for doing readiness checks on your custom code for S4 migration, that also has vulnerability checker in it as well. So what should be happening, is, of course, every development team is always on top of all of this, no doubt. They should be regularly running that across all of their custom code, and they should be running the readiness compatibility across all of their custom code, even if they think it's going to be, 2 years until they go to S4 HANA, right? It's a good idea to be looking at it. I think somebody's put a follow-up saying ATC hardly contains code security coverage. That's why there's third-party tools available as well. But certainly the ABAP test cockpit does say that it has some code vulnerability capabilities within there. So I would look at that if you're not using it. If you've already discounted it because it doesn't work for you, then the method that you're using should be the method you continue to use as you prepare for S4.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. Yes. Question, when we refer to the S4HANA cloud subscription in RISE, do we mean the software as a service product?
Okay, right. So
RISE, and then there's qualification, or whether it's just a NetWeaver ABAP.
Yeah, so RISE, within the RISE contract, at the core of it is S4HANA in a subscription model. That means you're paying for S4HANA as a monthly subscription for a number of full user equivalent licenses. That actual technical product can be the public cloud version, or it can be the private cloud version. For most existing customers who want to, in quotes, move to S4, they will probably land in the private cloud edition because they will want to migrate a lot of the things that they have. Net new customers, or customers who are starting again because they think their business processes have significantly changed, they may well land in the public cloud edition. The two editions are different, but from the contractual perspective, they're treated broadly the same. So you have a recurring fee, you have all the components included that we've talked about, but of course, when you get down to the detail level, some of the capabilities are different between the two products, and some of the, let me think of another example. Yeah, so patching, for example. In the public cloud, patching upgrades are more dictated for you. In the private cloud option, you have some ability to flex as and when some things are applied. So you can choose to delay a version upgrade, for example, but only delay it for a certain period.
Okay, we're getting a few basic questions as well as developer type questions as well, which is good because I used to have a basis background and I used to be a developer, and then I did the dark art of security. So it obviously shows we're in the right area. We're inspiring or raising questions in other ones. One of the questions I'm just looking at here is what would be the impact on the on-site basis team, particularly to do with client copies and system refreshes?
Yeah, so within your RISE contract, you get a number of client copy refresh type activities. Let's call them let's call basis tasks, right? You get a number of basis tasks included, and you can buy additional ones. So what does that mean? That means you're paying somebody else to do it. So what does that mean? It means you're not doing it. So what does that mean? Your basis team aren't doing it at that point in time. For many organizations, moving to RISE can be a long journey. So, this isn't an overnight thing where it impacts on your basis team. But if you have a significant basis presence on site, or you have it as a rolling contract with a third party and you're paying them a significant amount for basis, like that is going to be impacted. No doubt about that whatsoever. It's not an immediate thing. It's not a binary kind of on to off thing, but yes, it is certainly going to be impacted. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I do know a lot of organizations, their security function is within basis. We can discuss that in the webinar on its own right as well. But there will be maybe an impact there if your basis team do a lot of the day-to-day security. but they now have less regular work, you would say, on monitoring the system. There's going to be an impact there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again the devil's always in the detail on these things, right? So, you know, for the purpose of this session, what you should be thinking is, my basis role moving forward will be impacted by this. That doesn't mean there's zero requirement for basis, but it will definitely not be the same on the other side. Okay, that's an absolute. The specific detail of that can be worked through on a line by line basis, either when you as a customer are talking with SAP about RISE, or when you're discussing it with your partner as part of a preparation for considering RISE. So all of this stuff is detailed and is available, right? And there's a lot of roles and responsibilities documents that go with this that you can find in the SAP Cloud Trust Center. If you're not familiar with that website, you know, all of the contracts, all of the agreements, all of the RACs, everything are available there for public access prior to signing sort of any RISE deal. So you can look at all of those and you can start to align and work out where the impact will be, but you need to be prepared that there will be a significant impact.
Thank you, Andy. One question about the security audit log, which I mentioned. It does remain the client's responsibility, because that's like an application within a standalone application within SAP itself. So you will have the ability to set the relevant parameters on that, rather than having SAP Cloud Ops doing that. It's always a tricky one, this is, because usually basis ensure that the audit log is running, but security makes sure that they are capturing the right information in there. And you don't necessarily want too many people working on the security audit log to hide things. So hopefully that addresses that question. One of the things we will say is if we don't answer everything here today, we'll do a follow-up of all the questions and answers for them anyway. And I think it was the SAP Trust Center, Andy, was it where the specific question about the website you just mentioned?
Yeah, there we go. I've just popped it in the chat for people if they want to see it.
Thank you, Andy.
It's an aggregation site, so it rolls up everything. So you do need to kind of work your way down through the various areas, but you can find in there statements on security, privacy, compliance, the data centers, the cloud operations team that we've been talking about. You can find all of that covered in there.
Yes. Okay. I'm just going back through the list of questions to make sure we haven't missed anything that I can easily answer here, because if there's anything that needs a deeper answer, we'll probably do that as a follow-up if that's okay with people. Yes, as regards security hardening, SAP Cloud Operations should make sure that the profile parameters are set correctly and not changed, which is always one of the interesting things. It's all very well good saying that on day one they were right, but 2 days later they would change and nobody knew they'd changed. That should be in line with what your organization deems appropriate. They'll have a standard that will be in place for possibly around password management, password aging and things if you're not using single sign-on. But everything else should be in the security policy or an agreed system setting on that one. A lot of what we're talking about is the private cloud offering. There is the public cloud offering, but I think you've got even less opportunity for customization in the public cloud. I think, Andy, it's safe to say that most of the people we're seeing are going private cloud for now.
Yeah, I think so. I think we still see, by and large, existing SAP customers wanting to try, in their words, upgrade to S4, right? Now, upgrade isn't a word we tend to use because it's more of a migration, but the general principle is I see some value in the configurations, in the things that I have, the data I have, and I want to bring that forward. Now, if you're in that frame of mind, then that means you are, 99.9% likely to land in the private cloud edition in RISE. If, on the other hand, you're starting fresh, then you really should be looking to see whether the public cloud functionality fits what you need.
Okay, thank you for that. There's been a clarification from somebody on the call that I recognise their name. There are already apparently some certified for RISE third-party products.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, should have clarified that.
Yeah.
There is a program to certify the products, third parties. I should know that because we've got some. But yeah, absolutely. So your first pass with a third party would quite literally be to say, have you certified your add-on for RISE? And if their answer is no, then the question would be, well, and your plans to do so are what? And if they say, well, we don't really know what RISE is, then I'd suggest you may have a little bit of a bigger challenge, and you may be going to market to look for an alternative. You never know.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And then one that just scrolled up.
There was a SOX question as well.
Yes, that was the one. Yes. So
yeah.
Who knows what SOX is actually going to deliver when it comes? It's been alluded to for many years, but if we think about that sitting in the at the application layer, anything to do with users and roles is in the application layer. So anything to do with monitoring the users and roles would still sit in there. Depending on what you're using as your risk identification tool, may impact how you are connected to your S4 core for actually extracting the data. But there will still be a need to ensure that what access the users have is appropriate for what they need to do and does not expose an organization to any risk. Because that's basically all UK SOX is going to put in place, is making sure that if there is somebody that can do an end-to-end process, there are appropriate checks and balances on the way, or mitigating controls, ways of monitoring it, and also ways of detecting it. So in that scenario, I don't think that will change very much other than how the tool connects, probably. And hopefully it'll be a certified for RISE tool so that there are no arguments about, oh, we can no longer monitor for segregation of duties concerns or critical access concerns.
Chris, there's a quick comment that I'd make on that as well. I think it's very important for people to remember that it's not just a case of saying kind of what will it be like when we go to this system. It's the fundamental shift from what you have now, right? And when we're talking about whether that's things like SOX or whether it's whatever processes you've got in place for monitoring, managing, and looking after that, the fundamentals of what you currently have will be changing. Like there are three fundamental things you can't ignore. Like number one, the location of it is fundamentally going to change. It will no longer be physically located where it's currently located. Just even that simple change would trigger a revisit of any number of processes and procedures internally that you have around that system. The second thing is the software will be fundamentally changing. You'll be moving probably from ECC to S4. That's a complete change on the database layer. That's loads of changes. So that would invalidate any previous things that you have about your SAP system. And then the third thing, which Chris mentioned earlier on, the way in which that system is then being managed is going to be completely different. Because even if you currently outsource all of your application management and technical management to a third party, it probably isn't SAP. But when you move to S4 in RISE, the technical thing, the infrastructure thing will be SAP. So even if you just step back and look at those significant changes, pretty much any process, any procedure you've got in place is going to have to be revisited when you move, because pretty much everything changes.
Thank you for that, Andy. A really good summary at the end, and we are actually unfortunately at time now. So as always, I'd like to thank you for listening. We will try and get answers to any questions that we didn't answer on the call out to the attendees. But as always, if you've got any questions, do feel free to reach out to myself details on the screen there, and hopefully help you on your journey to Rise. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Andy, for.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.